Hey, traders, welcome back to another episode of the Trading Coach Podcast. Today, we're going to talk about back testing and how to choose the right pairs for your type of strategy. Rob had a question about, he said, I have a general question that keeps coming up in my journey. He says, how do you narrow down the pairs to back test on your intended strategy? He said, I'm currently testing the Jason Greystone trend continuation strategy and I'm back testing the euro dollar pair. The reason I chose this pair is because it's the most volatile pair. I chose it because everyone says you need volatility. It's a, quote, major pair. However, on reflection, I wonder if there were better pairs that I could have chosen on the onset. Perhaps pairs that are known for trending short term, known for trending long term, an index instead of a pair, something volume and volatility based, not necessarily majors versus the minors. Is there a resource out there that perhaps provides a high level answers to these questions? I might not even know to ask questions. I might not even know what questions to ask in the first place or what to look for. I feel like this is an important question as the effort taken to backtest a strategy manually is significant, and even someone with a degree of mental toughness may sometimes struggle, especially if backtesting results may not be quite what they expected or hoped for. So I asked him to reach out to, well, I gave him a few answers, and I'll kind of tell you guys what I gave him, but I also told him to reach out to you guys, which is why I just saw him type on the chat. But do you guys have any opinions about that? About any way to narrow down the pairs in which you plan on back testing? A line graph? Open line charts, or line charts. Is there any way that you can narrow it down pre-testing? Richard says maybe zoom out on all the charts to see which trends better over the long term. Switch to trendy markets. Yeah, but how do you know what markets are trendy? That's the question that he's trying to figure out. So, and again, I wrote to him this morning, but I'll tell you guys here as well, right? So I don't think there's any kind of shortcut to it. I don't think there's any resource that will give you any hints that say, hey, this is a market that you should test for this. This is a market that you should test for that. What you'll find in testing is that, for the most part, all markets go through different phases. Each pair, you'll have phases of where it was very trendy, phases where it was consolidative, phases where it was both or one or the other, back and forth. I think the only way to understand what markets or what pairs may perform the best with your style of trading is to actually go through. Now, this is why we always talk about kind of that pre-backtesting phase instead of just hopping straight into your detailed backtesting, right? If you go to your pre-backtesting phase, right, you can scroll through many years on a particular pair and you can kind of get an idea of if something is going to work pretty well or not, right? So I'll always do, even before I start testing something seriously, I'll always do a pre-backtesting phase where all I do is count wins and losses, right? I don't track any other numbers. I just do wins and losses because I want to see what the hit rate is. Because very early on, I can see that if I go through a few years very quickly and I have like a 30% hit rate, probably, and again, this is knowing the strategies that I trade, a 30% hit rate is not something I have any interest in doing. I know that this pair isn't going to be one that's worth doing it. You go through pretty quickly and you can see that the hit rate is where you intended to be. You can mark it down as one that may be worth testing. So I would do something like that. I would take advantage of that pre-back testing phase. I would scroll through your charts, track very minimal numbers, and just see, right, if it's something that you think has a chance of working, or, and again, many of you guys have been through this, or if it's something that you can tell right away, like, man, there's no way this is going to be one of them. And the more experience you get in the market, you start to understand what pairs work well. So if you've tested, if you're on your 5th trend continuation strategy, right, because you can't quite get it to work, but you've tested 4 before it, you should have a pretty good idea of what markets or what pairs are going to work well with what you're trying to achieve, and which ones are not. Same thing goes for consolidative or type of strategies as well. We mentioned this earlier with Jack. I think I don't think you should assume that the major pairs are going to be the best performers. I think one of the problems that many traders make is they start off only doing the majors and they don't get the results they like. But they don't do any, and they dump the strategy, but they don't do any of the minor pairs, where the minor pairs may be the set of pairs that your strategy performs the best because you don't have to worry about as much nonsense and noise. So I think it's also always good to mix it up. You can throw a major in there, right? But also throw a minor in there, throw a mid-major in there, something like that. But that's what I told him. And I also said, speak to the traders on the chat. I know there are many other traders that are trading the Jason Greystone trend continuation strategy. Dig into their mind, saying, hey, I know a lot of you guys have tested this already. Were there any pairs out there that are complete duds and stuff that I should just stay away from? Are there any, hey, you trend traders out there, or are there any pairs that you have experience with that are like, hey, that's a pretty decent pair? And use the community, use the network. Trust me, it makes your life a lot easier. But in general, and again, I guess I'm in a different position than most because I trade for a living. So, aside from a couple businesses and wife and kids and coaching, I got nothing better to do. But I fully intend on testing every pair anyway. Like it could be my task completion issues. When I go through testing, I don't feel comfortable unless I've tested every pair that I can potentially trade. Because in the back of my mind, I'm always like, well, what if? So I'm not necessarily hunting to. I enjoy the experience of back testing, the learning part of it. So I'm not in necessarily, and again, I'm at a point in my career where I'm already trading successfully, so there's no urgency to kind of get started and do something that works. I have time, in a sense, on my side because I'm going to be trading successfully, whether whatever strategy I'm working on works or not. But I like the journey. I like going through and just getting to know the pair better. And, if it works, that's great. We add it to the potential portfolio list. If it doesn't work, maybe I've learned something in the process. So I always want to test every pair no matter what. But I know that's just me. Everyone's a little bit different. Not everyone wants to spend that much time testing everything. But I know me, it would personally bother me if I had a 4-pair portfolio or 8-pair portfolio and like the Euro Aussie sitting out there and I didn't test it, and I'm like, I wonder. I start seeing setups in the live room. I'm like, I wonder if this is maybe. So I always like getting it out the way first and foremost, and then creating the strongest portfolio I can. Yeah, that's why I said I said he may be looking in the wrong market as well. Again, we spoke about this earlier. Forex is going to be tough for trend continuation traders. And also depending on the type of trend continuation trader you are, right? We talked, the whole Foundation 2 course was built around micro trends. If you're someone that can only trade the macro trend, you're going to be in trouble, right? If you're someone that can do both, you have an opportunity, right? So we talked to Joseph earlier with the NASDAQ. And, although the NASDAQ overall is bullish, right? All-time highs. He was able to catch a short-term bearish trend continuation opportunity because he's a trend trader. But being a trend trader doesn't necessarily mean he has to catch the overall trend. It could be taking a trend trading approach into a smaller trend, and you can capitalize. Basically, this is going to get confusing. It always does. You can capitalize you can make profit on a pullback, taking a trend continuation approach into the pullback. Does that make sense? It should make sense by this point. You guys have been through the courses. right? Because what he caught on the NASDAQ was a pullback. He caught the Delta dip, right? But it was a pullback, bigger picture, a trend trade, short term. And you can do that in Forex all day because of the amount of consolidation that it gives you. But it depends. Some people can trade that. Some people can't trade that. I probably should have included that in my email to Rob. Because if not, you're going to go through, depending on what time frame you're trading on, you can go through like years. Like if you're trend trading the euro dollar, there's going to be like a 2-year period where you have zero opportunities because we just were in consolidation. We never made a new structure high. So there's so many variables that go into it. So many variables that go into it. So if you see him on the chat, he was on there right now. Address his question. Help him out. I think he's kind of in that stuck place of back testing where he starts to get a little bit frustrated, and we've all been there. We know how it goes, where everything's just kind of imploding on itself. So any wise words that you can say to help him out and just keep his head up, that would be appreciated. Thank you for joining. As always, do me a favor, support the show by leaving me a rating and a review. Also, make sure you follow me on social media at Akil Stokes RTM. Anyone else is a fake. If I ever reach out and DM you or ask for money, it's a fake. So just be careful out there.